Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Welcome into another edition of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. It is Monday, February 22nd, and we got a fantastic show lined up for you here today. But before we get into our show, I do want to take a moment here at the top of the episode to give a shout out and send my well wishes to all of our listeners down there in the great state of Texas. I know the Lone Star State has been through the ringer here the past 7 to 10 days with the weather that's taken place. Frozen pipes, busted pipes, no electricity. There's been a lot happening down there, and I know we have listeners from that state down there. I have buddies who live down in Houston, Austin, Dallas, San Antonio, all over the state. Some have been affected more than others, but I know there's been a ton of chaos happening, whether you lost power for days on end, you know, the houses were freezing, they got young kids they're trying to figure out what to do with. So I know they are not alone, and I just want to send, again, my well wishes to everybody down there. Hopefully things have picked up and gotten better here recently. I believe I read the weather upticked to the 50s and 60s, kind of trending back in the right direction. But there has been a lot of chaos, a lot of things happening. And if you were somebody affected by the weather, the pipes, the electricity, I hope everything is starting to stabilize and not a ton of damage was done to you guys down there. So we're thinking about you from up here in the Northeast, outside of Philadelphia. Again, I know it's been crazy, so hopefully you guys made it out unscathed out there. But I also wanted to announce, and you guys have heard by now, we have a new host here within the Baseball Podcast Network. Patrick will be joining us. He'll be giving you guys episodes twice a week, coming out on Sundays and Wednesdays. You know, I'm Thursday and Monday. We have Jack still bringing you guys programming, but just wanted to welcome Patrick to the family here. I know he's going to give you guys quality content out there on a bi-weekly basis, so check out Patrick's episodes if you haven't already. He's new to the squad here, and send him some well wishes, some thank yous, leave some comments, and welcoming Patrick to the team. But we got a great show, like I mentioned at the top for you guys. Here in the first segment, we'll get into all the Fernando Tatis Jr. hoopla that's taken place since he signed his recent contract. Then we'll transition into just news, notes, kind of everything going on around Major League Baseball. And we'll wrap up with some MVP talk, predictions, bets, best bets, gambling style. So it's a good one for you guys today. But like I mentioned, after I recorded my episode Wednesday for Thursday, it came out that Fernando Tatis Jr. signed a 14-year, $340 million extension with the San Diego Padres. And man, I knew this was in the works. There were rumors of it happening here before the start of the year, but there are just a couple of different ways to look at this. And you guys all know the numbers by now, but the breakdown of the contract is starting to roll out here as details are being finalized. Speaking to some people, they're telling me that they're still finalizing details in regards to Pacific money in certain years. So none of these numbers are exact science and finalized here, but this is what we're hearing here at the podcast network from within the contract negotiations itself. So once again, on the surface, 14 years, $340 million. I mean, over 20, just under $25 million a year, average annual value. But the way this contract breaks down is really one of the fascinating parts. And this is a shout out to the GM out there in San Diego in understanding how his team's payroll is currently set up and how he can manipulate the contract to be able to stay competitive for year after year after year. This is not a situation where, hey, they're going for broke this year, and ultimately they could be left with a bad contract at the end, and it is fascinating. So some of the details I've been able to find out through conversations here in 2021, Tatis will get a $10 million signing bonus and only have a $1 million salary. And the way they're breaking this contract down is because Tatis was still available for arbitration the next handful of years. And typically when you're under team control, your numbers don't expedite to an extreme level due to how the process plays out. Well, this contract is very similar in structure. Again, this year, his base salary is going to be $1 million. With the $10 million, he's going to get up front for his signing bonus. Then in 2022, he's only going to make $5 million. 2023, $7 million. In 2024, $11 million. So doing some quick math here, you're looking at a total of $24 million being paid out over the next 4 years. And yes, the AAV of 24 per year, that's what counts kind of against the salary cap, luxury tax, whatever you want to call it out there. But the next 4 years, he's not getting paid an astronomical amount of money. It then jumps to about $20 million in the years 2025 and 2026. So for 5 years, the maximum amount that he is going to get paid is only $20 million. And you break this down with some other average annual values out there in the game, and it is certainly on the lower level of what these big-time players are going to receive. I mean, we've seen Trevor Bauer get $45 and then potentially $40 million per year here moving forward. Garrett Cole's in the 30s. I mean, there are people that are going to be much higher than the $20 million Tatis will get between now and 2026. And then, again, because details are still being finalized, it doesn't jump until $30 million until 2029. So 27, 28, and 29, he's going to be somewhere around that $25 to $30 million mark. And then it is said that the contract will top out at $36 million per year by the end of the contract, which right now takes place in 2035? So again, an extremely backloaded contract for Tatis, and not just a straight $24 million a year over the next 14 years. It's going to go 1, 5, 7, 11, 20, 20, 24, 28, 30, 32, 34, 36. So, and when you look at things, and the way I kind of break it down to some friends that I've had discussions with and people within the industry, is the average AAV for a standard to above average major leaguer. And again, Tatis is being talked about as a potential perennial MVP candidate, potentially on the route to the Hall of Fame. You know, I do think it's a bit premature to have some of those discussions, but I have read articles about how he was on a Hall of Fame track. But even at this point, topping out at $36 million a year, again, Trevor Bauer's already at 45. He's already at 40. And if you look back to history, just locally here in Philadelphia, I mean, 5, 7, 10 years ago, Ryan Howard signs a huge deal, ends up tearing his Achilles, was never the same player. He was getting about $25 million a year as one of the highest paid players in baseball. So you fast forward 10 years, it's up to $45 million. So use that same logic, fast forward again another 10 years until 2032. Say Tatis is at $35 million a year. Well, top guys are going to be at $55 million a year. So Tatis may be underpaid for the entire length of this contract if you were to look at it from a year-to-year basis. Now, of course, Fernando Tatis Jr. just got life-changing money and is now set basically for life, his next generation, and everything moving forward. So that's why, from a player's perspective, you certainly take the security of having a job for 14 years, getting paid for 14 years. But you could look at this as he's undervaluing himself 10 years from now if he continues on the trajectory to which he is moving forward here. So it will be fascinating to see if performance continues to increase, and ultimately if he tries to renegotiate here at some point, or if the Padres are going to get a steal in about 7 years when he's making $30 million a year and the top guys besides him are making $50 million a year because he signed this deal all the way back in 2021. So it'll just be an interesting kind of concept to follow along with where the highest average annual value is and where Tatis comes in with this picture, because the amount of money being paid to these players, both in total contract and on a yearly basis, is only going to increase. I mean, yes, we had the coronavirus, some economic issues here this year, but it'll just be fascinating to see how this continues to develop and moving forward here. So the next part about this conversation in this contract, and there have been some articles written about it, is the deal that Tatis Jr. made with the company Big League Advance at the age of 19. This was back when Tatis was in Single A, and essentially it's an insurance policy for players as well as this company that says, hey, if you ever make the big leagues, typically the numbers work out after having some conversations. You get about $100,000 right now up front for 1% of all your major league earnings. Or you get $500,000 right now for 5% of your major league earnings, or all the way up to $1 million for 10% of your earnings. And if this player gets injured or never pans out and makes the major leagues, they don't owe this company any particular money. But of course, now in the case of Tatis signing this big contract, he owes money back to Big League Advance. And after conversating with some people in the industry, the rumor out there is that he owes about $28 million back to Big League Advance. And if you break it down, it's probably about 7.5% to 8% that he is paying back out of the $340 million. So that means when he was in Single A, he got an upfront sum of about $750,000. And even Tatis states that this was used to increase his eating habits, increase his living situation, being able to pay bills, being able to move forward. Now, he's betting on himself, and he knows that if he gets a huge contract, he's going to have to pay back this money. But at the time, when you're in Single A and under the previous agreement, making $250 a week? You know, I've talked to guys who have played at the Single A, Double A level that say they rack up credit card debt on a yearly basis just trying to get by as a major league ball player. So if you're able to, get $500,000, $600,000 to increase your workout program, hire a chef, hire a trainer, and hire everybody to help you make that next step, it's a win-win for both situations. I've seen articles written about how it's predatory from this side of things, and I certainly don't get that aspect of it. I mean, these players know what type of agreement they're signing on at this point, and it's not fair. He got $500,000 and now he owes $25 million. Well, they understand that when they sign the contract. So let's not, put all of the blame on Big League Advance and say, they're kids, they don't know any better. They certainly do, okay? They understand what's happening at this concept, and I think it's a win-win for both parties. I mean, I think Tatis is as good as he is right now, partly because he was able to hire a trainer. He was able to hire a chef. He was able to position himself to be successful with the advanced money he got from Big League Advance. And now, yes, they get a return on their investment at a certain percentage, to which is previously agreed upon. I mean, it's no different than a personal loan that you would take out from a bank to pay some of your bills. So can we just stop on the conversation around how this is bad business or predatory in practice and just understand that this is indeed a win-win for both parties here? And on top of this $27 million, again, that's what I've heard he's going to owe Big League Advance. When you look at tax breakdowns and the money he's going to have to pay out from this contract, it's going to be about $190 million in regards to national, federal, state income tax, local jock tax, whatever you want to call it. So out of the $340 million, about $215, give or take, Tatis is not going to be taking home. So at the end of the day, over 14 years, he's only going to get, what's that math here, a quick 130 out of it, about $10 million a year take home. Now, understanding still, this is life-changing money. Certainly, I mean, I'm not arguing that, but just the fact that common individuals or common fans will see $340 million, oh my God, that's so much money, understanding that the player himself is only going to take home about $130 of that money based on past agreements, taxes, whatever it may be. And it's just a completely different mindset and view on what's happening there. So, again, a lot going on with Tatis. Very early in his service time. He's got 2 years of current service time, and the previous record for a contract with somebody at about that service level was Mike Trout when he signed a $144 million extension with the Angels at that point. So Tatis jumps that by about $200 million. Somebody this early in his career receiving that amount of money. It's just fascinating. It's the third highest value for any contract. Trout's at about $430 is obviously number one. Next was Mookie Betts at $365, and then in comes Tatis right above Bryce Harper at $330, $340 for Tatis Jr. But the last detail I want to share with you guys is the fact that there are no trade clause apparently in this contract. So he's able to veto any trade and what's happening there. And there are also no opt-outs. That's one of the big things you need to look at because, again, if he outplays this contract for the first, 5 to 7 years, they could opt out and look to reset that market at that point, such as Manny Machado, his partner over there on the left side of the diamond, has an opt-out after year 5 during his 10-year agreement with the Padres. And if he continues on his current pace, he could look to get another 10-year, $300 million after getting 5 and $150 and continue to cash in on their performance. So no opt-outs for Tatis, which I found fascinating. He does have a no-trade clause, I believe, but certainly a ton of money here being paid to Tatis over the next 14 years. And one little thing here to leave you guys with in the first segment is I did read that the New York Mets, you guys know me. I'm a Phillies fan. I got to take a shot at the Mets when I can here. Come on. Can you blame me? But the New York Mets will still be paying Bobby Bonilla after the Tatis deal runs its course. So 14 years, $340 for Tatis, and even after this is completed, the Mets are still going to be giving Bobby Bonilla his Bobby Bonilla Day money every summer. Just a fascinating visual to see. 2036, I think, is the last payment for Bonilla. But, man, just a great day for baseball, a great day for the Tatis family, of course, and a great day for Tatis Jr. himself. But that'll do it here for the first segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. We'll take a step away here for a word from one of our sponsors, one of our sister shows. When we come back, I'll talk to you guys about who else I think could be getting a huge contract extension or a huge contract in free agency, as well as touch on some news, notes going on around the league. So stick around, everyone. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. We'll be right back after this.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back, and thanks again for listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. Appreciate y'all listening. We got a great show. We're continuing around here. Just got done with our Fernando Tatis Jr. contract conversation. We're going to continue it here, but in a slightly different way. I'm going to start off segment number 2 talking to you guys about who else I think is next in regards to getting either a huge extension or a huge contract here moving forward. Because Tatis Jr., he was ultimately the 15th player to sign a deal of $240 million or more. Of course, you had Mike Trout, Mookie Betts recently, Bryce Harper, Giancarlo Stanton, Alex Rodriguez a couple of times, Garrett Cole, Manny Machado, Steven Strasburg, Nolan Arenado, Anthony Rendon, Albert Pujols, Robinson Cano, Miguel Cabrera, all of these guys have gotten a deal over $240 million, and now some of them, the return has been less than, the best here. Of course, Miguel Cabrera still kicking on that extension he signed back in 2014, but his return here hasn't been fantastic lately. Albert Pujols coming to the end of his deal. Robinson Cano, not great, and yet to be determined on the Rendon, Strasburg, Arenado deal, Machado. So there are some hits and there are some misses when it comes to these huge deals over long periods of time, and it's a fascinating conversation because Tatis is by far the youngest to sign an extension of this length, and 14 years is the longest contract we've seen in the history of baseball. Both Bryce Harper and Giancarlo Stanton signed 13-year agreements, but they were also aged 26 and 27 when they came to these agreements, and Tatis, only being 22 years old, lends them to a bit of a window there at the end of his career. People are saying he's only going to be 35, 36 when this contract comes to an end. He could have another handful of years by the time this happens. So it is a high-risk, high-reward type of deal, but again, how the contract is structured, it does seem like the Padres are set up for success here moving forward. And who could be next? Who's up for this next type of deal here moving forward? And, not extension-wise, but free agency, actually kind of discussing both of them here. You have the shortstop market itself and then the market of everybody else. And, just looking at shortstops briefly, I've mentioned a ton of them in the past who could get paid here. But I have 7 names written down of guys that I see worthy of anywhere from, $225 to $350 million moving forward, based on age, performance, anywhere in between. I don't want to pigeonhole them into all $300 million guys. But again, these are all going to be big, big money guys moving forward. And first, you got to start with Javier Baez in Chicago. He's going to be a free agent after this year. He's been fantastic here early in his career, still a young guy. All these guys are going to be in their kind of mid-20s, late 20s, if you're nitpicking one or two of them. So, maybe not the length they'll have in order to get to that $300 million mark. It may be more, 7 years, 8 years, 175. But the 25 to 30 million a year mark, I think each one of these guys has a case and has an argument that they're worth this particular type of money. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility for any of them. Javier Baez, he's going to get paid. He's a big-time offensive shortstop, great at defense, helped Chicago continue to be the team they were that won the World Series. I think he gets a big deal, probably outside of the city of Chicago, but the Cubs need to decide. They can't let all of these guys walk, can they? They trade you Darvish, of course, Craig Kimbrell, but, they have Baez, Rizzo, and Bryant as kind of that big three that will all be free agents here moving forward. Can they let all of them just walk out the door? I think they got to hitch their wagon to at least one of these guys, maybe move another one for some trade pieces to kind of restock the stable, and then the third one just walks as a free agent. Looking at it, I would trade Chris Bryant from the third base spot. I think a former MVP will get you a lot of return on your investment there. I also think looking at the future, Javier Baez is the best bet to continue to perform and be a very, very high-level professional player. So I'm trading Chris Bryant. I'm extending Javier Baez, and I'm going to let Anthony Rizzo walk. I think, yes, Rizzo has been kind of the face of the Cubs. He's been maybe the first person that comes to mind when you think about it, but I think the first base position, there's more talent there. There's the ability to maybe move a catcher over, third baseman over, just to get that production offensively from the first base spot, I think will be easier to replicate than what you could get from shortstop with Baez and at third with Bryant. I don't see him ever getting back to that MVP form. I think he could be a very formidable big leaguer, but I don't think he gets back to that MVP level per se here moving forward. But next on the list, I have Xander Bogaerts and Boston. He has an opt-out clause after the 2022 season. He's a bit older than some of these other guys, but there's conversation that he could look to get $25 million a year, maybe trying to get 7 years, 175 for Bogaerts, because he's continued to be fantastic. He signed a big deal just a handful of years ago in Boston that looks like a great deal for the Red Sox year after year after year as Bogaerts continues to just perform. And that's why this opt-out in 2022 may be coming into consideration. And again, if there isn't a pandemic or a global pandemic like for J.D. Martinez, I think he may have opted out this past offseason, but kind of looking at the market, he's going, oh, okay, maybe I'm not going to get the amount of money I thought I could based on what's happening out there economically. I don't think that'll be the case after next summer for Bogaerts, and if he continues to hit, he continues to be solid at short, he's going to find somebody who'd be willing to pay him. Now, could it be Boston re-signing him for an even higher price? Absolutely. I don't think he completely moves on from Boston necessarily, but I do think he'll be due for a raise after 2022, which leads me to believe that he's going to opt out and potentially move elsewhere. Next on the list, I got Francisco Lindor. Everybody knows what's going on there in New York, and the conversation is Tatis Jr. the best shortstop in all of baseball? Some say yes. Some say it's Francisco Lindor. So if Tatis is getting 14 and 340, now maybe you take 2-3 years off due to age with Lindor, but you get to that 10, 11-year mark, looking at 24, maybe 30 a year. I think you're looking at 11 and 350 for Francisco Lindor, kind of more of that Mookie Betts particular style of contract, 365. Maybe he comes in a hair under Mookie Betts, in my opinion, in regards to the best overall player in baseball. So I think, 340, I think Lindor tops it during less years, gets that 10 to 12 year mark, 350, 355, and is the top paid overall shortstop in baseball, just under Mookie Betts as the second highest contract ever signed. So Lindor, it's going to be fascinating. Are the Mets dealing this out? They just got rid of their GM for you guys know what. We've discussed it here on the podcast. So right now, they don't have a general manager. And if you're Lindor at this point, don't you want to at least taste that free agent water? Don't you want to just stick your toe in, maybe get a little touch on the temperature as to what's going on out there? I know the Mets are a big market club. Of course, they'll be in even if he does reach free agency. But hey, there's going to be other people in the market, right? Other fish out there that are going to want to nibble at Francisco Lindor. So I think he rides it out. I think he gets to free agency, and it's going to be a matter of whether Steve Cohen is going to pay up to keep him around or if this is a one-year rental type of opportunity. So I think ultimately the Mets will pay him, but I do think there's going to be others out there in competition ultimately for him. Next is Corey Seager out in L.A. The Dodgers don't have an astronomical amount of money after bringing everybody back, so I think his time in L.A. may be coming to an end here. I don't think he's at this particular level, 300 plus, but $200 million for Seager over 8, 9, 10 years, $20 million, 24 a year over 8 years. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility, so I think he could get a huge deal again here moving forward. Next up, we have Trevor Story and Colorado. Are they going to trade him? They just traded Nolan Arenado. He was the next one on the list that they're saying they should move him for value moving forward. Well, I think they're waiting to see ultimately how the year plays out. Maybe an injury happens somewhere, but I don't think he's coming back to Colorado. And if I'm Trevor Story, looking at the way that organization is set up, I'm not going back to Colorado and returning. So he's going to hit the market. And if Lindor is getting 355, Story's getting 275, 280, maybe in my opinion. I mean, he's kind of just a step below those guys and still a fantastic offensive shortstop. You also have Carlos Correa. There's been conversation. Him and the Astros were able to come to an agreement and avoid arbitration, that they've had some long-term discussions into what his value could potentially be moving forward. I think he would like to return to Houston, but I also think he's going to want to get paid. Former number 1 overall pick, maybe put him as the 3rd or 4th best shortstop behind Lindor, behind Tatis, behind Baez. I'd have Correa right there, and I think he's looking at least 250. He wants to hit 300 million plus. He thinks he's worth it. So if he stays healthy this year, if he hits around 300, 40 home runs, 100 RBIs, and has the offensive year he's capable of having, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility for Correa to get that particular deal. And then the last one here, extension-wise, Gleyber Torres, New York Yankees. He's been fantastic in kind of being that next shortstop in those Yankee pinstripes behind Derek Jeter. He's awesome offensively. He's still a young kid, still learning, still growing. So maybe he's a year, 2 years away from this type of extension. But I don't think we can write off the fact that he may get a $300 million extension. Looking at how the contracts are laying out in New York, obviously they were concerned about the luxury tax this year, so it's not going to happen right now. But looking at the books moving forward, some money falls off where they transition. This could be a discussion being had here in just the near future for Torres moving forward. It's just fascinating, all the names, even at the shortstop spot, that could potentially get paid here. But, outside of the shortstop position here, you kind of get to the outfield, and you get to those young kids. Juan Soto for the Washington Nationals. He should be up for an extension like this in the near future. I mean, he's one of the best hitters in the game of baseball right now, and he looks to potentially be one of the best hitters ever in the game of baseball if he continues on this pace. So, is Washington going to pony up and pay this much? He's a 22-year-old, just like Tatis. He's under control for 2 to 3 more years. So if it doesn't happen during this season, I think after this year, if he has another year where he hits around 295, it's going to be a conversation where Soto is going to have to be one of the top paid guys in all of baseball. It's just, you can't work your way around that at all. And then next up, Cody Bellinger for the Dodgers. Like I said, Corey Seeger, he's going to have to move on because they're going to have to pay Bellinger. Rookie of the Year, MVP, 2-time All-Star, Gold Glover, Silver Slugger, World Series champion. The accolades for Bellinger just go on and on and on. And he's going to want to be up in that 330 Bryce Harper to 365 Mookie Betts type of level in regards to the contract. And yes, Soto at 22 doesn't have nearly the accolades Bellinger does. So do you take a year or two off maybe for Bellinger because he's a bit older? But that average AAV is something that is going to have to continue to be discussed and just fascinating for the Dodgers. But he's the next one on the to-do list out there for L.A. and keeping their guys at home here. So it'll be interesting to see which direction they ultimately go. Then you have some pitchers you want to discuss. Lucas Giolito is coming up on a contract here. He's been absolutely dominant the past couple of seasons. He's been up there with Shane Bieber, and Bieber's under control for another year or two. But, Lucas Giolito, the guy, a 1.32 plus ERA since 2016, and he's still only 26 years old. So he's slated to hit free agency after 2023. And I think he could become a $300 million pitcher if he stays kind of on the trajectory he's at today. So there's a couple of arms out there that may move. And then you got the guys in Toronto. Bo Bichette could be up there for a potential extension. You got Biggio, who could be up for an extension. Guerrero Jr. potentially up there for an extension. So which way is Toronto going to go? Which guy are they going to pay? Who are they going to hitch their wagon to? Ultimately, in regards to the future, it'll be fascinating to see which domino falls first there. And you have Michael Conforto for the Mets. There's been talk for him potentially having a George Springer type of contract extension. And he's 3 years younger than Springer. He's had a lot of offensive success, and Springer got 6 years and 150. So does Conforto get 8 and 200? Is it even a bit more than that? Potentially, it's just, fascinating the way it could go. Rafael Devers, talking about the Red Sox and Bogarts. Well, their third baseman, Devers, has been just as good over there. And he's coming up on free agency here in a couple of years. So he could potentially be up for a huge deal. You have Aaron Judge in New York. I can't believe I didn't mention him until just now. He continues to just absolutely crush baseballs and, is still arbitration eligible. So when does he get paid? Because he's going to be a free agent after 2021. Now, he is a bit older. He'll be 31 when he hits free agency, but 7-8 years for Judge in regards to 250. I don't think that's out of the world of what he could potentially look to bring back. So, there's a lot of things that could happen, but we've had 15 players sign a deal over $240 million, and I think that number could skyrocket up to 25-30 by the time we're having this conversation coming up here in 2023. So, a lot of guys out there about to get paid. But that'll wrap it up here for the second segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Once again, I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. We'll step aside here again from a word from one of our sponsors, one of our sister shows. But when we come back, we'll talk news, notes, signings, injuries, rumors, everything across Major League Baseball here going on as not just pitchers and catchers, but all position players are reporting to spring training here in the next couple of days. So stick around, everyone. We'll be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
And thanks for listening to the third segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. Appreciate y'all listening. If you haven't done so yet, check us out on social media. GSMC Baseball Podcast. We're out there on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, as well as the Podcast Network, available on all these platforms. That certainly helps us continue to grow and expand as a podcast network, as a baseball podcast, and we want to continue to get up the charts there on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play. So wherever you're listening to us, please like, rate, review, subscribe, comment. We appreciate it here. If you're new to the program, welcome in. Thanks for listening. If you're one of our valued listeners who tunes in every episode, welcome back. If you haven't hit that like button yet, take 30 seconds, find out where it is, and give it a go. I really appreciate it here, guys. But we got a great show continuing here, segment number 3 of the GSMC Baseball Podcast. We're talking all news, notes, injuries taking place across Major League Baseball. And there's been a little bit going on since Thursday's episode. Just a fascinating kind of 72 hours here. Initially, I want to start out with the COVID testing, COVID protocols. Pitchers, catchers, position players all had their initial screening, their initial testing taking place here, and the details have been released as to the positive tests that have come out. There were 13 total positives in 4,336 tests that were administered during the initial test screening. Now, this comes back as a 0.3% positivity rate, which is just fantastic, because if you're looking at that compared to just the general population, that was as high as 10, 11%. Now, things have decreased as we're warming up the weather here. The vaccine continues to roll out, but 0.03 is certainly something that they were, very happy with when it comes to Major League Baseball. Both the commissioner's office and the players. There were 9 players and 4 staff members who tested positive, if you break down those 13 total positives, and that was over 11 different teams. So 9 players, ultimately 4 staff, 11 total teams affected. I was able to get some names here out of the total 9. Not everything is disclosed due to HIPAA and, of course, just COVID protocol. And everybody knows out there, if you're on the protocol, it doesn't mean you were positive, this, that, and a third. But the names I was able to find for you guys are over 5 teams. It was a total of 6 names. The Diamondbacks had 2 names on the list, so this was one of the teams out of the 13 down to 11 total. They have Luis Frias and Stephen Voigt test positive during their initial intake, and ultimately will miss the next 2 weeks of action here. You then have the Boston Red Sox and Kevin Piawecki, who tested positive. The Cubs' Kyle Ryan, the Twins' J.A. Happ, and the A's' Frankie Montas. So a couple of pitchers there at the end of the list, Montas and Happ, both testing positive during the initial stage, so they'll be pushed back a week to 10 days here in regards to their spring training routines, pitchers and catchers. But ultimately, again, 0.3% positivity rate, fantastic. There have also been 2,298 quote-unquote monitoring tests that have been given here over the past day or two. As they continue the initial intake, now it's the monitoring phase, and there have been no new positives during this monitoring phase. So this is a huge positive and a huge step in the right direction for baseball. The fact that all of these guys are together in the clubhouse, they've been able to make upgrades during the offseason, cleaning services, kind of understanding the virus a little bit more. So, I mean, if you total it all together, 2,200 plus 4,300, quick math, 6,500, 13 positives only out of 6,500 tests is just a great omen for those of you out there praying that we don't have any setbacks like myself and baseball continues on time and we have ourselves a fantastic 2021 season here. So thumbs up, good news when it comes to the initial readings for COVID positives and protocol here moving forward. Other injuries that have taken place since we've been to camp. JT Realmuto for the Philadelphia Phillies. It's come out, and I'm just shaking my head. I know you guys can't see me while you're listening to this, but just shaking my head when it comes to the injuries and the Phillies. And we just re-signed JT, and now it comes out he's got a fractured thumb on his throwing hand, so it's his right thumb. And local officials, local representatives say that they are hopeful that he will be ready opening day. But it's also one of these things where he's not clearly going to get a rapport going with all the new bullpen arms that they brought in. You know, he's trying to get a vibe going with Nola, Wheeler, Howard, all these guys in the rotation. And he's not going to be able to do that as he's in a cast for the next couple of weeks. Will be reevaluated here in the early mid stages of March. And at that point, they're hoping he can start to swing, start to progress. And again, by opening day, be ready to go. But he's going to miss out on a ton of at-bats for spring training. So is his month of April going to be shot? Is he going to struggle in April because he didn't have 100, 150, 200 at-bats in spring training, whether they're live in-game or simulated games with minor leaguers? That's really where he's going to be, because you're going to try to get him 10, 15, 20 at-bats a day. You're going to have to go to the minor league park and just rotate him through drills and simulated game experiences. Hey, Realmuto, you're up. Next guy. Okay, Realmuto back in there to try to get him ready to go as quickly as possible for that April 1 start date. That's going to be here before you know it. So, bad news if you're a Phillies fan. Realmuto, fractured thumb. Of course, you have Rhys Hoskins coming off a Tommy John surgery on his non-throwing arm. So, not an issue there, but still just flexibility, being able to hit, being able to swing. In question whether he'll be 100% when it comes to opening day. So, two guys in the middle of the lineup in a team that's built for offense could be missing some time for the Phillies fans out there. You also have Max Scherzer, who sprained an ankle while running and getting in shape and training for spring training. Now, there shouldn't be any long-term effects coming out of the ankle injury, but again, something to monitor. Maybe it continues to linger. And then out of Reds camp, Brandon Bailey is going to have to undergo Tommy John surgery and miss the 2021 season moving forward. So that's the biggest injury thus far I've seen out of spring training. Bailey's going to miss the entirety of the season. Realmuto questionable for opening day, to use a football term. And then Max Scherzer should be good to go, but certainly a slight issue there with his ankle potentially pushing him back about a week or so in his throwing program. And there's a bunch of other guys coming off of injury from last year. I just want to mention their names here briefly as we're talking injuries. The Yankees' Luis Severino, he is targeting a late summer return time, coming off of Tommy John surgery, getting back to that rotation for New York. You also have Chris Sale, who's hoping to come back middle to late season, coming off of Tommy John, potentially a bit earlier. But again, I don't think they want to push it there in Boston. Noah Syndergaard, coming back off of Tommy John surgery. He is reportedly targeting May or June. Again, I think the Mets aren't going to try to rush things with Thor to try to get him back as quick as possible. You have Steven Strasburg returning from a year where he basically made one start, two starts due to carpal tunnel neurosis, however you say it there. I know I butchered that one, but he signed a huge extension before that. Didn't really play last year. The Yankees also, Jameson Taillon, looking to get back from an injury-plagued season last year. Out on the West Coast, you got A.J. Puck, left-handed pitcher out of Florida, who was Tommy John in 2018. He was in the bullpen in 2019, had shoulder surgery during an injury-plagued 2020. So he looks to be a full go and earn a roster spot here, maybe missing the beginning of the year just ever so briefly. You have Tommy Cannell with the Dodgers trying to get back. Brandon McKay of the Tampa Bay Rays. He's looking to get a spot here going with Charlie Morton out of town, Blake Snell out of town. There's a spot open where McKay's hoping to jump in there. Everybody knows about Corey Kluber coming off an injury with the Yankees. You have Chris Archer for Tampa Bay as well, trying to get into that rotation with Snell and Morton gone. And then on the offensive side of things, Yordan Alvarez coming back for the Astros. 2019 Rookie of the Year award winner, hitting .312, 28 home runs, 82 RBIs in about half a season. Back in 2019, Mitch Haniger for the Seattle Mariners. He had a very good 2018, but dealt with injuries the last 2 years, basically all year. And then Trey Mancini missed 2020 after getting diagnosed with colon cancer. But all the reports are that it is positive, and he is hoping to be back at some point during the year this summer to help out the Orioles. So a few injuries taking place, a bunch of guys coming off injury, and now transitioning to the signings that have happened in the last 48 to 72 hours. You have Brett Gardner returning to the New York Yankees. We talked about how that one was pretty much, a done deal. It was just a matter of money. When you talk to people around the industry, there weren't really any other teams interested in Gardner, or to the point where he was going to leave the Yankees for a lot more money type of conversation. So he returns on a 1-year, $4 million deal. This puts them right up against just under the luxury tax threshold of $210. So they stayed under and were able to agree with that there with Brett Gardner. They do have an option for a second year at $7 million. So this could parlay into a 2-year, $11 million deal. But 1 and 4 for sure. Gardner gets there in New York. And then you have the Oakland A's. And honestly, I gave you guys my AL West predictions, and this was before Oakland went on a signing spree. They signed 4 guys since I basically wrote down those predictions, and I think it's going to change some things. I think the A's are now ahead of the Angels as a potential AL wildcard team, and possibly in conversation with Houston as winning the American League West. I had them as a third-place team as shortly as a week ago, until these recent signings when they rebuilt this bullpen and this pitching staff. I bump them up now to potential AL West champions and certainly American League wildcard contenders. I think the A's have done a fantastic job here over the past week, really improving this ball club. They signed Mitch Moreland to a 1-year, $2.25 million deal. Nice arm there. Nice depth piece, even if he's not in the rotation. Certainly has done it before. But the signing here that I really enjoy is Trevor Rosenthal. I talked to you guys about how is this guy still available. Liam Hendricks moves on from Oakland. And I think Rosenthal is a nice fill-in for 1 year. Now, this is a 1-year, $11 million deal. But the language and how this one's structured is absolutely fascinating because it entails deferred money over the next 2 years. So Rosenthal gets 1 in 11, but the payout for the contract is going to be $3 million this year, $3 million next year, and then $5 million in 2023. So he's only going to have a job guaranteed for 1 year, but he's going to be paid $335 over the next 3 seasons. So if he struggles, he won't have a job, but he'll still be getting paid. And if he continues to excel, he's going to be double dipping. The Athletics are going to be paying him as well as somebody else potentially here in the near future. So a nice work there by Trevor Rosenthal to get himself $11 total million this late here available on the market. You have Taijuan Walker. He signs with the New York Mets, starting pitching. They whiffed on Bauer. They whiffed on Paxton. They transitioned to Taijuan Walker. He signs what is written here as a 3-year, $23 million deal. But this one ultimately breaks down to 2 years and $20 million guaranteed, because that third year is a player option which according to MLB and MLBPA gets written into kind of how they present the deal as guaranteed. But ultimately, if he declines, he still gets $3 million paid out. So he'll get $17 million paid to him over the next 2 years. And then if the option is declined, an additional $3 million to bring it to 20. And if not, I believe it's $8 million for that third year. So you're looking at 2 and 20 guaranteed, a potential of 3 and 23 being paid out over 3 years. And this is a nice signing. Great value by the Mets, in my opinion. I wanted the Phillies to take a look at this guy. He was excellent in Seattle. He was fantastic for Toronto when he was traded there. So the Mets getting some value at the margins here with Taijuan Walker and 2 for 20 or 3 for 23 moving forward. Some smaller deals. We have Aaron Sanchez to the Giants, pitcher. They get some depth out in the West Coast there. San Fran was in the pitching market. We had talked about that. He gets a 1-year, $4 million deal to go out west to the Bay Area. And then Jake Lamb signs with the Atlanta Braves, 1 year and $560,000. So major league level deal for Lamb, but he gets big league minimum at just over $500K. Here moving forward. And then lastly, wrapping up segment number 3, rumors going on out there. Well, not rumors essentially, but Tim Tebow announced his retirement. I really don't want to talk about that. I'm not a big Tim Tebow guy. Wasn't a huge fan of him trying baseball after football and that entire ordeal. So I'll just say, hey, go to his Instagram, go to Facebook, read the retirement announcement if you really want to. But no more hoopla circus. That is Tim Tebow for the New York Mets. Ian Desmond has opted out of the 2021 season for the Rockies. He opted out of 2020. He has decided to opt out once again here in 2021. And looking at the Rockies roster, I don't exactly blame him. And then the last bullet I have is Jackie Bradley Jr. continues to be in conversation with the Red Sox about a potential deal moving forward. I talked to you guys last episode. He was open for 4 years. I don't think Boston wants to go that far, so they're at a bit of a standoff here when it comes to conversations. But the Red Sox are really the only people in conversation with JBJ, and people do think it's a matter of time before they come to an agreement, potentially here before the 2021 season gets too far in. So that'll do it for segment number 3 of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. We'll step aside one last time. When we come back after a word from our sponsor and our sister show, I'm going to talk to you guys about MVP in 2021. Where are the odds at? Where's the value? Where's the sharp money coming in? It's going to be a great conversation, so stick around, everyone. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. We'll be right back after this.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
Welcome back to the fourth and final segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. It was a fantastic sports weekend out there. Hopefully you guys were able to enjoy some of it. You had Michigan, Ohio State, and hoops. 2 Final Four contenders coming up here as March Madness is just a few weeks away. So if you're into college basketball, check out that podcast within the podcast network. You had hockey outdoors at Lake Tahoe. There were some weather issues going on. They had to delay Saturday's game from the afternoon till midnight Eastern time on Saturday. I stayed up to watch a little bit of that just past midnight. Sunday night here, as I'm recording, my Philadelphia Flyers are taking on the Bruins outdoors at Lake Tahoe. You had the Genesis Open in golf going to a playoff. Tony Finau, Max Homa going at it here. It's a ton of fun. And you got the NBA coming at you, the All-Star game coming up. So if you guys haven't checked out the other shows within the podcast network, available on Apple Podcasts, do yourself a favor and check those out wherever you're listening, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, whatever it is. It's fantastic content out there for you guys. So also check us out on social media, the GSMC Baseball Podcast, as well as the GSMC Podcast Network. Like, rate, review, subscribe, all that good stuff. I know I ask you guys all the time, but it certainly does help us continue to increase up the rankings. Most recently, we were 13th best baseball podcast out there. I'm hoping we continue to push that up, get into the top 10 here during the summer of 2021. But fourth and final segment here. Over the past couple of weeks, I've been talking to you guys about my predictions when it comes to where everybody's going to finish, playoff predictions, all of that stuff that's taken place. And now I want to get into some MVP talk, some MVP conversation here. And both American League and National League, if you're in a state out there that allows sports gambling, please check out where your odds are currently at because, I'm referencing here in Pennsylvania, it is legal for me. I'm looking at Vegas Insider, a couple of different odds, trying to see ultimately where the value is, who the favorite is. So let's jump into it here. Let's have the conversation. Starting out in the American League, at the top of the list, you guys guessed it. I don't even have to tell you, but Mike Trout is the favorite here as of February 20th. His odds are currently at plus 200 to win the award, and the next closest guy is plus 1,000. Now, what do these numbers mean? These numbers mean essentially if you would bet $100, you would be paid out your $100 back plus $200. So if you bet $10, you'd get $20, and any ratio in between that. Alex Bregman is second here at plus 1,000. So bet $100 on Bregman, get your $100 back, and then the additional $1,000, just so you guys kind of understand how that conversation's happening. Next on the list, as we continue to go down, there's two guys at plus 1,200, Aaron Judge and Jose Ramirez. Two guys at plus 1,500, Matt Chapman, Anthony Rendon. Last year's champion, Jose Abreu, comes in at plus 2,500. There's a bit of a log jam there. You got Vlad Guerrero Jr., Yohan Moncada, Luis Robert, Gleyber Torres, and then things continue to increase after that. So what's the market currently telling us out here when it comes to the American League favorite? Well, like I said, your favorite is Mike Trout at plus 200, considerably ahead of the rest of the group there, but sharp money has been coming in on Aaron Judge. And what does sharp money mean? This is professional sports gamblers. So there are apps out there. There are a lot of programs where you can track who the professional sports gamblers are putting their money on, whether they share it themselves or the casino will let you know, quote unquote, sharp money. Well, sharp money's coming in on Aaron Judge at plus 1,200. And he, of course, hasn't really been in the conversation, top three throughout his career. He's been derailed by injuries. Last year, he had a calf injury, so he played just 28 of the 60 games. But if you go back to his rookie season, when he hit 52 home runs, he hit 284. If he's able to stay healthy for an entire season and put up the offensive numbers that he has in the past, he's not a bad bet. And this is where the professionals are putting their money. They're putting their cash on Aaron Judge, and that's where it's coming in. Now, plus 1,200, I see that. He's ranked third on the list, like we said, in odds. So not a huge long shot or a long bet there, but certainly great return as well. I mean, again, you could put your money on Trout, but bet $100, you're only going to get 200 in winnings. So plus 1,200 would be a nice return there. So a best value bet in the American League, according to Vegas Insiders, they've seen a ton of value, and where their biggest liability, they believe, is actually Vlad Guerrero Jr. at plus 2,500. So bet $100, get 2,500 in winnings back from Vlad. He's entering his age 22 season. People think that he could be primed for a breakout this year. For his career, 24 home runs, 102 RBIs. Doesn't seem like the big leagues are overwhelming for him. He's gotten in much better shape. I've even read reports that he could potentially be down about 40 pounds this offseason. So he's going to be a bit more flexible, but not losing that power based on video reports that we've seen. So he could certainly be a surprise contender, especially if the Blue Jays make a push towards winning the American League East or even making the playoffs. So, yes, they added Springer. They added a couple of other pieces. So, Vlad Guerrero, though, if he carries that offense, could be the guy that jumps to the top of the list. Now, personally, when I look at this list, I kind of look at it as a team basis. Okay, if the Yankees are the number one team in the American League and Aaron Judge is the number one player on that team, that's why he's getting the sharp money, because that's what the experts and the professionals are seeing based on their analytics. Now, I look to myself out west, and I eliminate the West, because Mike Trout and the Angels, I think they're going to finish in third place again. I think he's going to be good enough to win the American League MVP. I think his numbers are going to be MVP worthy, but I don't think the team is good enough to win him that award. That's where I have trouble. Alex Bregman, Houston Astros. Even if they win the American League West, I see them as the 3 seed, potentially being 85 and 78, somewhere around that particular record. So I don't think that's good enough to win him the award. Matt Chapman, same thing with the A's. I go to the American League Central. Similar to last year, Chicago White Sox. I predicted them to have the number 1 seed in the American League. I think they're the best team in the American League. So I look at their top players. Who's it going to be? Is it Jose Abreu once again? Is he going to repeat offensively? I don't think so. I think he's kind of due for a slight step back. Now, next on the list, Yoan Moncada and Luis Robert at 2,500. And I think that is potentially where your value lies. I like Luis Robert in center field. If he stays healthy, he continues to perform at plus 2,500, being nice value, a bit of a long shot, and potentially bringing home the award. You even have Tim Anderson at plus 3,300 if you really want to go down a level there. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But I certainly see why the sharp money's coming in on Aaron Judge, because they see the Yankees being the best team in the American League and him being the best player on that team, which is a lot of times how the MVP award is given out in these types of situations. So transitioning now to the National League. What do we got going on in the NL? It's a bit more cloudy at the top. We got a lot of people close together. 5 guys between plus 750 and plus 850 for a return on your investment. The top 2 right now, Mookie Betts and Juan Soto, both plus 750 to win the award. You also have Cody Bellinger, previous MVP award winner, plus 800. And then the 2 newcomers coming in there at plus 850, Fernando Tatis Jr. and Ronald Acuna right after him. Then you have a next tier at about plus 1,200, which is the names everybody recognizes. So the top, you kind of have the kids that they think are going to continue to ball out. Next level, your steady professionals. Plus 1,200, Nolan Arenado, Freddie Freeman, last year's award winner, Francisco Lindor, and Christian Yelich. Right below them, you get Harper, Seeger, Machado, Story, all of those types of conversations. So your 2 favorites, once again, Mookie Betts and Juan Soto, both at the top of the list. I mean, Mookie Betts, his transition from the American League to the National League certainly didn't slow him down. He finished second in NL MVP voting a year ago behind Freddie Freeman. You have Juan Soto, who's finished in the top 10 twice in 3 years, and just a matter of, a 351 average last year, shortened season, had COVID earlier in the year. If he puts it together for an entire season, he's primed to win the award. But the sharp money that's coming in the National League, and this one's a bit fascinating to me. It truly is. I don't align with this one as much as I do with Judge in the American League. But Christian Yelich at plus 1,200 is getting the professional money in the NL. The NL MVP winner in 2018. He finished first runner-up in 2019 and then had an absolutely disappointing 2020 season. I mean, his numbers dropped across the board. So I believe the professional gamblers are seeing this season as an outlier for Christian Yelich. They think he's going to get back to his MVP caliber season, potentially carrying the Brewers to that NL Central title. I just don't agree with it. I don't think they're going to win the Central. I think it's the St. Louis Cardinals that are the team to beat in the Central. So I see the value at plus 1,200 with a previous MVP award winner at that level. But if you're going there, I mean, why not go Freddie Freeman, who's at that level at plus 1,200? He won it just last year. It's just, I don't know. The National League is wide open. You could argue a bunch of different guys here in regards to what's going on and ultimately who's going to win the award. So the long shot and one of the value bets that I've seen here, Pete Alonso at plus 3,300 for the New York Mets. Now, the Mets have undergone huge changes, of course. Francisco Lindor is much higher on the list. They added McCann, but 2019 Rookie of the Year winner Alonso burst onto the scene, 53 home runs, 120 RBIs, really had a letdown in 2020. If he's able to get back to those types of numbers offensively, 50 home runs, 100 RBIs, he's certainly going to be right in the middle of the MVP conversation. And this also gets back to where do these teams finish in the standings and who is the reason why? I mean, starting out west, you're going to have the Dodgers and the Padres, which again is why you have Betts, Bellinger, Tatis, and Machado all in the top 10 when it comes to odds. Because basically they look at it going, okay, the Dodgers, it's going to be Betts and Bellinger carrying them offensively. The Padres, you got Tatis and Machado. So if one of those teams wins 110, 115 games, the award's going to go to the best player on that team, hands down. I mean, nobody's even going to be close. You look at the NL Central. A lot of guys are jumbled together, and if somebody like Christian Yelich can come out and absolutely dominate, they could be the reason why their team wins the Central, and that's why they're the MVP. Same with Nolan Arenado. If he's the reason going from Colorado to St. Louis, that all of a sudden St. Louis wins 95 games next year, I don't think there's a question it's going to be Nolan Arenado. Even if the Dodgers win 110, I think St. Louis is an 85-win team. So if they win 95 games all of a sudden, I think Arenado's your conversation. And then in the National League East, who's going to win the division? Is it going to be Atlanta? Is it going to be Washington? Is it going to be Philadelphia? Is it going to be New York? And if one of these teams really separate themselves, who's the top guy offensively? In Atlanta, you got Acuna Jr. and Freddie Freeman. Freeman won it last year because they were the top team in the NL. If you go to Washington, it's clearly going to be Juan Soto, which is why he's one of the favorites at plus 750. You go to Philadelphia, certainly going to be Bryce Harper, plus 1,500 odds. So if he has an MVP-type year, Philadelphia could win the division. He's going to be right in the conversation. And then we just talked about the Mets. You either have Lindor at plus 1,200, or that's when you scroll all the way down and your next up is Pete Alonso at plus 3,300. So who's going to win that division? I think it'll be Atlanta. I think Freddie Freeman's going to continue to hit the cover off the ball, but I also have Washington sneaking in as a wild card team, so I think Juan Soto's good value at plus 750. I wish he was a bit lower than that, but, really, I think he's a good bet as well. So Arenado, Yelich plus 1,200, Lindor plus 1,200. There's a lot of different ways you could go in the National League ultimately to make some cash here, but it's certainly a much wider and open conversation when it comes to National League MVP than American League MVP, in my opinion. I think you got Trout, Judge, a couple of White Sox over there. In the National League, certainly anybody, even from the National League East, could separate themselves. But that'll wrap it up for today's episode. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Sunday night recording here. Like I said, a fantastic weekend out here. Hopefully you guys, wherever you're listening, you're staying safe in the weather. Texas, Northeast, we're getting more snow here on Monday. It's crazy, but a great show for you guys. We talked about Tatis Jr. getting all that money, how his contract's going to break down. We then discussed in segment number 2 who's next on the list and how I think 10 to 15 guys are going to join the list of people who signed a deal over $240 million. Ultimately, it's going to double in the next year or two. And then you have all the injuries, signings that have taken place, and, of course, my MVP predictions here in segment number 4. So one last time, I'll ask you, please rate, review, share, subscribe to the podcast with anybody out there who's a baseball fan. That goes a long way for helping us spread the word. But most importantly, you guys have yourselves a fantastic week. And I'm the host, Kevin Mahalik. I'll talk to you guys again on Thursday. Thanks for listening, everyone.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.